This hidden barrier keeps 99% of people from success, and how to overcome it. The invisible assassin of dreams. What if I told you that there's a single psychological force responsible for more unfulfilled potential than poverty, lack of education, and bad timing combined? What if I revealed that this invisible assassin has murdered more dreams, destroyed more opportunities, and wasted more human genius than every economic recession in history? Here's the brutal truth that will either liberate you or terrify you. Most people don't fail because they lack talent, resources, or opportunity. They fail because of one thing: a primal force so powerful it can paralyze a Harvard graduate just as easily as a high school dropout. A force so insidious that it convinces brilliant minds to choose mediocrity over magnificence. That force, fear of failure. But here's what will blow your mind. The same fear mechanism that destroys most people's potential is exactly what the top 1% use as their secret weapon for breakthrough success. While you're being paralyzed by the possibility of failure, they're using that same fear as rocket fuel for extraordinary achievement. We're talking about legends like Thomas Edison, who failed over 10,000 times before changing the world. Oprah Winfrey, who was told she was unfit for television before becoming the most powerful media mogul in history. Elon Musk, who risked everything when both Tesla and SpaceX were on the verge of bankruptcy. J.K. Rowling, who was rejected by 12 publishers while living on welfare before creating a billion-dollar empire. In the next 39 minutes, I'm going to expose the neuroscience of fear, reveal why it's actually hardwired to keep you mediocre, and show you the exact psychological techniques that allow extraordinary people to transform their deepest fears into their greatest strengths. You'll discover why failure isn't the enemy of success. It's the prerequisite for it. If you've been playing small because you're terrified of failing big, if you've been choosing comfort over courage, or if you want to understand how to weaponize fear instead of being weaponized by it, prepare to have everything you believe about fear and failure completely revolutionized. The evolutionary trap that keeps you small. Let me start by revealing why your brain is literally designed to sabotage your success, and why this ancient wiring has become the modern enemy of achievement. The survival software glitch. Your brain is running 50,000-year-old software in a modern world. Back when humans lived in caves, the individuals who survived were those who avoided risks at all costs. Eat an unknown plant. Death. Venture into unfamiliar territory. Predators. Challenge the tribal hierarchy. Social exile and starvation. Our ancestors who took risks died, while the cautious ones lived to pass on their genes. The devastating problem. You inherited their ultra-conservative survival programming, which is completely mismatched for modern success. In today's world, the biggest risk is not taking risks. The biggest danger is playing it safe. But your prehistoric brain doesn't know the difference between pitching a business idea and fighting a saber-toothed tiger. The loss, aversion, death trap. Nobel Prize-winning psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered that humans experience loss aversion. we feel the pain of losing something twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. This isn't just a preference. It's a hardwired survival mechanism that now functions as a success prevention system. Think about this practically. The pain of potentially losing $10,000 on a business venture feels twice as intense as the excitement of potentially making $10,000. Your brain literally experiences the imaginary pain of failure more vividly than the imaginary pleasure of success. This asymmetric emotional processing ensures that most people will never take the calculated risks necessary for breakthrough achievement. The status quo bias prison. Your brain has another built-in success killer called status quo bias, the psychological preference for things to stay the same, even if your current situation is mediocre or miserable. Your brain perceives change as dangerous and will generate elaborate rationalizations for why you should avoid taking action. This bias makes comfort zones feel like safety zones, when they're actually stagnation zones that slowly kill your potential. The catastrophic thinking loop. When you contemplate taking risks, your brain engages in catastrophic thinking, imagining worst-case scenarios in vivid detail while ignoring best-case possibilities. You don't just think this business might fail. You imagine bankruptcy, homelessness, social humiliation, family disappointment, and personal devastation. Meanwhile, you barely consider the possibility of extraordinary success because your brain isn't wired to emphasize positive outcomes. It's a social proof conformity trap. Humans survived by staying with the group. Individuals who deviated from tribal norms risked exile and death. This creates modern social proof addiction. You unconsciously look around and do what everyone else is doing, even when everyone else is mediocre. Your brain interprets conformity as safety and uniqueness as danger, ensuring you'll never stand out enough to achieve exceptional results. The perfectionist paralysis mechanism. Your brain demands certainty before action, but breakthrough success always requires acting with incomplete information. This creates perfectionist paralysis. You keep researching, planning, and preparing instead of executing because your brain demands guarantees that don't exist. You wait for perfect conditions that never come while opportunities pass by. The rejection sensitivity override. Humans are social creatures who survived through tribal acceptance. Rejection meant death, so your brain treats modern rejection like a survival threat. This makes you avoid putting yourself in any situation where you might face disapproval, criticism, or rejection, which eliminates almost every path to extraordinary achievement. The shocking reality: your brain is not designed to help you succeed in the modern world. It's designed to keep you alive in a world that no longer exists, which means it's actively working against your success in the world that does exist. The neuroscience of fear-based self-sabotage. Now let's examine what actually happens in your brain when fear takes control and destroys your ability to achieve your potential. The amygdala hijack process. When you face the possibility of failure, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, floods your nervous system with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This amygdala hijack literally shuts down your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thinking, creative problem-solving, and strategic planning. Within milliseconds, you transform from an intelligent, strategic thinker into a reactive survival machine. Brain imaging studies show that during amygdala activation, blood flow to the prefrontal cortex decreases by up to 30%. This means fear literally makes you stupid. You lose access to your highest cognitive functions, precisely when you need them most. This is why you can have brilliant business ideas in the shower, but become tongue-tied and confused when presenting them to investors. The working memory destruction. Fear doesn't just impair your thinking, it destroys your working memory capacity. Research shows that anxiety can reduce working memory by up to 50%, making it impossible to hold complex information in mind while making decisions. This is why people make terrible choices when they're afraid. Their brain literally can't maintain the mental complexity necessary for good decision-making. The attention narrowing effect. Fear creates tunnel vision, both literally and figuratively. When your brain perceives threat, it narrows attention to focus exclusively on immediate danger while ignoring everything else. This attention narrowing makes you blind to opportunities, creative solutions, and alternative perspectives. You become so focused on avoiding failure that you can't see paths to success. The stress hormone cascade. Chronic fear of failure creates sustained cortisol elevation, which has devastating effects on brain function. Elevated cortisol shrinks the hippocampus memory formation, impairs neuroplasticity learning, and disrupts sleep quality recovery. People living in chronic fear of failure literally experience brain damage that makes success less likely over time. The dopamine depression. Fear suppresses dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation, reward-seeking, and goal pursuit. When dopamine levels drop, you lose the drive to pursue opportunities and the ability to feel excitement about potential achievements. This creates a vicious cycle where fear reduces motivation, which reduces action, which increases fear. The default mode network activation. During fear states, your brain's default mode network becomes hyperactive. This network is responsible for self-referential thinking, worry, and rumination. Instead of focusing on external opportunities and solutions, your mind becomes trapped in internal loops of self-doubt, worry, and negative prediction. You spend more mental energy imagining failure than creating success. The motor function impairment. Fear doesn't just affect thinking, it impairs physical performance. Stress hormones create muscle tension, reduce coordination, and slow reaction times. This is why people choke during important presentations, interviews, or performances. Their brain's fear response literally degrades their ability to execute the skills they possess. The memory consolidation disruption. Fear impairs your ability to learn from experience by disrupting memory consolidation during sleep. When you're chronically afraid of failure, your brain doesn't properly process and integrate new information, making it harder to develop expertise and learn from mistakes. This keeps you trapped in repetitive patterns instead of evolving toward mastery. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. Fear doesn't just make you avoid opportunities. It systematically destroys the cognitive and physical capabilities necessary for high performance. The success paradox. How legends use fear as fuel. Here's where everything changes. Let me show you how extraordinary achievers transform the same fear mechanism that paralyzes most people into their secret weapon for breakthrough success. Thomas Edison, the failure data collection machine. Edison didn't just overcome fear of failure, he completely reframed what failure meant. When asked about his 10,000 failed attempts to invent the light bulb, Edison replied, "I haven't failed. I've found 10,000 ways that don't work." This wasn't just positive thinking. It was a systematic approach to using failure as data collection. Edison understood that innovation requires exploring the unknown, and the unknown is filled with failure by definition. Instead of fearing these failures, he celebrated them as necessary steps toward success. His laboratory notebooks show that he tracked failures as meticulously as successes, treating each failure as valuable information that brought him closer to breakthrough discoveries. The psychological principle Edison mastered was reframing failure from identity threat to process feedback. When most people fail, they think I'm not good enough. When Edison failed, he thought that approach doesn't work. This subtle reframe protected his self-concept while accelerating his learning rate. Oprah Winfrey, the rejection to resilience conversion. Oprah was fired from her first television job in Baltimore for being too emotionally involved in her stories and unfit for television. Most people would have internalized this feedback as confirmation of inadequacy. Oprah used it as rocket fuel for creating her own path. Instead of conforming to television industry standards that rejected her authentic style, she doubled down on emotional connection and personal storytelling, the very qualities that got her fired. This decision to embrace rather than suppress her authentic self led to the creation of a media empire worth billions. Oprah's fear transformation technique was authenticity amplification. When fear told her to conform and play small, she chose to become more herself, not less. She transformed the criticism that was meant to diminish her into the foundation of her unique value proposition. Elon Musk, the calculated risk maximizer. After selling PayPal for $165 million, Musk invested nearly his entire fortune into two companies that most experts said would fail: Tesla and SpaceX. The automotive industry hadn't seen a successful new car company in decades, and private space exploration was considered impossible. By 2008, both companies were months away from bankruptcy. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row, each costing tens of millions of dollars. Tesla was burning through cash and struggling with production issues. Musk was facing potential total financial ruin and public humiliation. Most people would have cut their losses and retreated to safety. Musk borrowed money to keep both companies alive and bet everything on SpaceX's 4th launch. When that launch succeeded, it saved both companies and launched Musk toward becoming the world's richest person. Musk's fear transformation technique was existential reframing. He didn't eliminate fear. He made fear of not trying bigger than fear of failing. He said, "I thought we would probably fail, but it seemed worth trying anyway." He transformed fear from a stop sign into a compass pointing toward meaningful challenges. J.K. Rowling, the rock-bottom launchpad. Rowling was a divorced single mother living on welfare, battling depression. and facing rejection from 12 publishers before Harry Potter found a home. She described herself as the biggest failure I knew and said she had hit rock bottom, instead of interpreting her circumstances as evidence of inadequacy. Rowling used her lowest point as liberation from the fear of failure. She realized she had nothing left to lose, which gave her permission to pursue her wildest creative dreams without fear of making her situation worse, Rowling said. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. She transformed her greatest fear, total failure, into her greatest freedom. By recognizing that she had already survived what she was afraid of experiencing. Steve Jobs, the perfectionist's fear of mediocrity. Jobs was famously difficult to work with because he demanded perfection and rejected good enough in pursuit of insanely great. His perfectionism wasn't fear of failure, it was fear of mediocrity. He was more afraid of creating average products than of facing criticism for his high standards. This fear of mediocrity drove Jobs to revolutionize multiple industries: personal computers, animated movies, music players, phones, and tablets. His willingness to risk commercial failure in pursuit of exceptional quality created some of the most successful products in history. Jobs' fear transformation technique was standard elevation. He made the fear of creating mediocre products stronger than the fear of commercial failure, which gave him permission to take creative risks that most business leaders avoid. The universal pattern. These legends didn't eliminate fear, they redirected it. Dame made fear of not pursuing their potential stronger than fear of failing in the attempt. They transformed fear from a barrier into a guidance system that pointed toward their most important work. The psychology of fear transformation. Now, let's examine the specific psychological techniques that allow you to transform fear from your enemy into your ally. Technique 1. The Failure Redefinition Protocol. The first step is radically redefining what failure means. Most people define failure as not achieving your goal, which makes every setback feel like personal inadequacy. Extraordinary achievers define failure as not learning from your attempts, which makes every setback feel like valuable data. This redefinition is based on growth mindset research by Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck. People with fixed mindsets see failure as evidence of inadequacy. People with growth mindsets see failure as evidence of learning. This single reframe transforms failure from identity threat to skill development, a practical implementation. After every setback, ask 3 questions. What did I learn? What would I do differently? What will I try next? These questions automatically reframe failure as feedback rather than verdict. Technique 2. The fear inversion strategy. Instead of trying to eliminate fear, flip it around. Most people fear the pain of failure more than they desire the joy of success. Extraordinary achievers fear the pain of not trying more than they fear the pain of failing. This technique is based on regret minimization theory. Research shows that people regret actions they didn't take more than actions they took that didn't work out. When you're 80 years old, you'll regret the chances you didn't take more than the chances you took that didn't work out. Practical implementation. When facing a scary opportunity, ask, what will it cost me not to try? Make the fear of inaction stronger than the fear of failure. By vividly imagining yourself years from now regretting that you didn't attempt something meaningful. Technique 3. The micro-failure desensitization method. Gradually expose yourself to small failures to build immunity to bigger ones. This is based on exposure therapy principles from clinical psychology. The more you experience manageable failures, the less threatening major failures become. Start with low-stakes situations where failure doesn't matter much. Ask for discounts you probably won't get. Apply for opportunities slightly beyond your qualifications or pitch ideas that might get rejected. Each small failure rewires your brain to see failure as survivable rather than catastrophic. Practical implementation. Set a failure quota. Aim to collect a certain number of rejections or setbacks each month. This transforms failure from something to avoid into something to achieve, which removes its emotional power over you. Technique 4. The catastrophic thinking reversal. Your brain automatically generates worst-case scenarios when you consider taking risks. Counter this by deliberately generating best-case scenarios with equal detail and emotional intensity. This creates balanced risk assessment instead of fear-based paralysis. Research shows that people consistently overestimate the probability and impact of negative outcomes while underestimating positive ones. Conscious best-case visualization corrects this cognitive bias and motivates action. Practical implementation. For every worst-case scenario your brain generates, create an equally detailed best-case scenario. Spend equal time visualizing both outcomes to balance your risk perception. Technique 5. The identity protection method. Separate your identity from your outcomes. Most people think, if I fail at this, I'm a failure. Resilient achievers think if this doesn't work, I'll try something else. This protects self-concept from being damaged by setbacks. This technique is based on self-compassion research by Kristen Neff. People who maintain self-compassion during failures recover faster and attempt more ambitious goals because their identity remains intact regardless of outcomes. Practical implementation. Before attempting anything challenging, remind yourself, I am not my results. My worth as a person is separate from my performance in any specific situation. This creates psychological safety that enables higher risk-taking. Technique 6. The social proof redirection. Instead of conforming to mediocre social proof, seek out social proof from people who've achieved what you want to achieve. Surround yourself with stories, examples, and communities of people who've overcome similar fears to reach extraordinary levels. This technique leverages social learning theory. Humans learn largely through modeling others. When you consistently expose yourself to examples of people succeeding despite failures, your brain updates its beliefs about what's possible. Practical implementation. Read biographies of people who've achieved what you want. Join communities of people pursuing similar goals, and actively seek mentors who've overcome similar challenges. Make success stories more prominent in your mind than failure stories. Technique 7. The commitment device creation. Create external accountability that makes it more painful to quit than to continue. This technique uses loss aversion to your advantage by making inaction more costly than action. public commitments, financial stakes, and reputation risks can all serve as commitment devices that override fear-based impulses to quit when things get difficult. Practical implementation. Publicly announce your goals. Invest money you can't afford to lose. Or create social accountability that makes quitting embarrassing. Design your environment so that fear of quitting outweighs fear of failing. The fear-success conversion system. Here's the systematic approach for transforming any fear into fuel for breakthrough achievement. Step 1. The fear audit process. Most people live with vague anxiety about failure without identifying specific fears. The first step is conducting a detailed fear audit to identify exactly what you're afraid of and why those fears exist. Create 4 columns. What specifically am I afraid of? Why does this scare me? What's the worst realistic outcome? What's the best realistic outcome? This process transforms vague anxiety into specific concerns that can be addressed systematically. Example, instead of "I'm afraid of starting a business," identify "I'm afraid of losing my savings, disappointing my family, and having to find another job if the business fails." Specific fears can be planned for. General fears just create paralysis. Step 2. The probability reality check. Most fears are based on overestimated probabilities and catastrophized consequences. Research the actual statistics for what you're considering. How often do businesses fail? What typically happens when they do? How do people recover from setbacks in your field? This reality check usually reveals that your fears are much less likely and less devastating than your imagination suggests. When you replace imaginary dangers with factual information, fear loses much of its power. Step 3. The preparation-action balance. Fear often disguises itself as prudent preparation. You keep researching, planning, and getting ready instead of taking action because your brain treats preparation as risk management. But excessive preparation becomes procrastination that prevents the learning that only comes from real-world experience. Set preparation deadlines. Give yourself a specific amount of time to research and plan, then take action regardless of whether you feel ready. Readiness is a feeling that rarely arrives. Competence is a skill that develops through practice. Step 4. The failure planning protocol. Instead of hoping failure won't happen, plan for what you'll do if it does happen. This removes the uncertainty that feeds fear and gives you confidence that you can handle whatever occurs. Create specific contingency plans. If the business fails, here's how I'll cut losses and transition. If I get rejected, here's what I'll do next. If I embarrass myself, here's how I'll recover. Having plans transforms unknown dangers into manageable challenges. Step 5. The success probability amplification. Most people spend more time imagining failure than success, which trains their brain to expect failure. Deliberately spend more time imagining and planning for success than failure. This doesn't mean ignoring risks. It means balancing risk awareness with success preparation. Visualize success scenarios with the same detail and emotional intensity you naturally apply to failure scenarios. Your brain needs training in success expectation just as much as failure preparation. Step 6. The iterative risk escalation. Start with risks that stretch you but don't break you. Then gradually increase risk tolerance through successful experience. This builds confidence and competence simultaneously while reducing fear, sensitivity over time. Begin with 60% probability challenges. Master those. Then attempt 50% probability challenges. Then 40%, and so on. Each success expands your comfort zone and prepares you for bigger risks with better skills and stronger confidence. Step 7. The fear as compass navigation. Use fear as information about where your growth opportunities exist. The things that scare you most often represent your highest potential impact. Instead of avoiding fear, follow it toward your most meaningful challenges. Ask, what would I attempt if I weren't afraid? Then ask, what's preventing me from attempting that now? The gap between these answers reveals your growth edge, the exact place where fear is preventing your breakthrough. The fear liberation revolution. Here's the ultimate truth that will either set you free or keep you trapped forever. The choice that defines everything. You face the same choice every extraordinary achiever in history has faced. Will you be controlled by fear, or will you control fear? Will you let prehistoric survival programming dictate your modern potential, or will you rewire your brain for breakthrough achievement? The realization that changes everything. Fear isn't your enemy, it's your guidance system. Every fear points toward growth. Every terror reveals treasure. Every anxiety indicates opportunity. The very things that scare you most are the exact things that will transform you most. The performance truth. You don't need to eliminate fear to achieve extraordinary results. Edison was afraid his experiments would fail. Oprah was afraid of rejection. Musk was afraid of bankruptcy. Rowling was afraid of poverty. They didn't succeed despite their fears. They succeeded because they acted with their fears. Your liberation moment. Right now, you have the same choice that every legend faced. Remain safe and small, or risk everything for the chance to become extraordinary. Your fears are not obstacles to your potential. They are the roadmap to it. The implementation challenge. Pick one fear that's been holding you back. Use the techniques you've learned today. Start with micro failures. Reframe setbacks as data. Make fear of not trying stronger than fear of failing. Transform your biggest terror into your next target. The final reality. Everyone dies, but not everyone lives. Everyone faces fear, but not everyone uses it as fuel. You can spend your life hiding from fear, or you can spend it conquering the very challenges that will make you legendary. The choice is yours. The techniques are proven. The only question remaining is, what will you do with this knowledge? Your future is waiting on the other side of your fears. It's time to stop running from them and start running toward them.